The legend. We are all excited. Orv, I sent you a list of the stuff, the toys that we have here, and you can see us. Okay, that was nobody. That was just a test. That was Ted. No 911. All right, so everybody, let's go. Orv, it's your show.
Thanks, guys. By the way, your local AREDN guru, Tom K1KY, who's on here, has agreed to team present with me. He's going to talk about your local situation since I'm obviously not local. So let me get started here. Let's see if this works. How's that? Okay. Okay, a bit of an apology. There's way too many slides in this presentation. That's the downside. The upside is a lot of them are photos. So we'll zoom through it and hopefully won't put too many people to sleep. Anyway, what I want to talk about first is data rates for ham radio digital modes. I'm not talking throughput, end-to-end throughput. I'm talking modulation rates. If any of you are old enough to remember dial-up modems, you know a 56K modem never gave you 56K. Well, it's the same deal with all of these, but we'll compare modulation rates, and obviously the faster the better. There's good old packet radio, 1200 baud. With the modulation they use, 1 baud is 1 bit per second. So in modern terms, packet radio is 0.0012 megabits per second. Wasn't especially fast in the 80s, and it hasn't improved any. Pactor 4, which is the fastest of the Pactors, could do 3 to 5 kilobits per second. That's better. Vara is a software modem that uses a sophisticated modulation on both HF and FM to get faster throughputs. FM is faster, and with the right hardware, you can get up to 25 kilobits per second. That's not too shabby. AREDN ham radio links, the links themselves, can be more than 100 megabits per second. And again, that's modulation rate, not throughput, because you know the more hops you go, the slower you go. And that's true from everything from packet to AREDN networking. So the software, as of this morning, supports 4 different brands of equipment and 100 different models across 4 different ham bands. The little asterisk is there to remind me to tell you that while they do support 100, 20 of them are on life support, otherwise known as sunsetted. As the AREDN software is derived from OpenWRT, an open source wireless access point software. So as they go, AREDN goes, and there are about 20 different devices that AREDN supports that OpenWRT has put on life support, sunsetting them, indicating that in the future they won't be able to provide updates for them because those models are so old and have so little storage on board that they won't support future versions of the code. Same deal with AREDN. Doesn't mean they won't run. It just means they won't be capable of taking new versions of the code. You know, if it doesn't, if it can't accept the code, it won't get any new features. That's not a big deal. But from time to time, they push down security updates, and that is a big deal. So if you're looking at the supported equipment, you see one that says sunsetted, go out of your way to avoid it. AREDN has a capability, if you wind up in an RF black hole, and many of us are still, the software has a capability of tunneling across the internet between nodes, so you can get on the network even if you don't have an RF link. I've been calling that the AREDN software, or the AREDN starter kit. The AREDN code lets us move into the Part 97 only channels, which are adjacent or part of the Part 15 and under Part 97 regulations. And that's there's both good points and bad points to that. AREDN is derived from the original broadband hamnet, and even back then they knew that even back then it was even worse, that hams aren't necessarily real network literate. So setting up a DHCP server or a DNS server, it can be challenging, especially if you don't know that much about TCP/IP. So anyway, what they did was they rolled those two servers into the AREDN software, and additionally, they added route discovery and routing information. In other words, the nodes go out and find their neighbors and build network information. We can run stock wireless access point. There's no longer any hardware hacking required, which lowers the entry level, the amount of effort you need to get started on this. That's a good thing. And when they're loaded with the AREDN software, like I said, they go out and discover the rest of the network, and they create a ham radio network that should say TCP/IP network. Dropped it off. So when they're loaded with the AREDN software, we call them nodes. And they're typically about 600 milliwatts, not high power by any means. And mostly these days we run on 5.8 gigahertz, but even on the older 2 gigahertz band, it's line of sight. No buildings, no trees, sorry, strictly line of sight. So as a result, just like using a handy-talkie to extend your range, you usually communicate through a hilltop radio site. With a handy-talkie, it's a repeater. With a node, it's another node. And that's how you extend the range. If your node happens to hear multiple nodes on multiple hilltops, it'll always choose the best route. The routing algorithm will tell it, this is the best route. Use this one. So there's no point in using omni antennas. In fact, there's a few downsides. So we always use directional antennas. So you've got this awesome ham radio network built up, but it's just infrastructure. It doesn't do anything. It's all about getting to the services, and services are things you can actually use. There's a few of them here. I won't talk about all of them, but they're all available to you. Additionally, these here, file sharing, web servers, repeater linking, games, pretty much anything you want, subject to the Part 97 regulations. And here's some examples. We have run all of these in Southern California from time to time. We aren't necessarily running all of them now, but we've tried them all, and I'm sure throughout the ham radio network community, there are people running other examples or types of services that we aren't. But anyway, here's some examples. If you ever use Slack at work, it's just called a communication hub for employees, or in this case, ham radio operators, to communicate with each other. A couple of the open source versions are Mattermost and Rocket Chat. They're Slack wannabes. They support texting like the old IRC, but also pictures. And you can have multiple channels available, different topics, different subjects, and you'll see that if you've ever signed into Slack. Say a Mattermost server can provide web access, but additionally, there are apps available for all the OSs out there. So I'll talk about this a little bit. This is a Mattermost application. This happens to be the Linux app, but they all look the same. This is a Mattermost server that KG6WXC runs. He and his family were out camping out in the Southern California high deserts the night of the Ridgecrest 7.1 magnitude earthquake. They were in a tent out on the flat. They got bounced around a lot. No harm, no foul. Next morning, Eric drove over to the surface rupture and took this picture and shared it with us on Mattermost. Now, we still don't have AREDN network access out in the high desert. It's way out in the boonies. But Eric runs 2 Mattermost servers, one on the mesh network and one on the internet, and he's got them bridged together. So he took a photo of this surface rupture, shared it on the Mattermost app on his phone, and we were able to see it, I don't know, 150 miles away on the mesh network at home. So it's pretty handy. there are a number of us that hang out there all the time. And this is a local Mattermost server, you know, Southern California. I'm sure there's others on different parts of the network. Voice over IP. Most people think it's phones, but you know, it's just a method of transferring digitized voice. This is getting to be a really old photo. This was prior to us deploying a VoIP PBX. Back then, the guy who wanted to put a PBX on the network wasn't real literate with Linux. Still isn't, but he's doing better. So he chose to buy this turnkey PBX from Grandstream. It's under $300, but it supports, I don't know, 256 extensions, 64 simultaneous conversations, and all the features you'd think of. I was using this old junker Cisco to test it with on the bench. And here you can see it here in the rack. It was recently moved to another repeater site, but this will tell you what it looks like in the repeater rack. This happens to be on Sulphur Mountain, south of Ojai, California. You can see the ocean from there. It's about 6,000 feet, I think. This is the phone. This is my phone. In our area, we recommend that people buy Grandstream phones just because it's easier to manage them from a Grandstream PBX. And if you can see it, excuse me, I have one new missed call, and this was a video. You'd see the little red light in the corner flashing. So voicemail. And that's not a big deal. I mean, this PBX has all of the features you'd expect with a high-level PBX, commercial. Depends on whether you decide to implement them or not. But we have voicemail and conference bridges and call forwarding and call waiting, all the usual stuff. Collaboration servers are the kind of servers you see the gamers using on TV and in the movies to keep in contact with the members of their teams. Some examples are TeamSpeak, Mumble, TeamTalk. If you go to Wikipedia and look them up, there's a list of at least 24 of them. We show these are some of the features available pretty commonly across all of the versions, and I'm sure there's other features. You can use a speaker, microphone if you have a laptop, or use a USB headset for really good audio. Because it's on a network, conversations are full duplex, which means you can interrupt the person who's talking. So you don't have to wait for them to say over or time out the repeater or anything. And you have created multiple channels, you can have multiple simultaneous conversations. And this is not communications grade audio. This is not your father's FM repeater. If the link is good, and it almost always is, the codecs and the phones will shift up to the highest quality. Very nice to listen to. This is a picture of a TeamTalk client. Again, I think this is on Linux, but they all look identical. On the left, this is during one of our nets, weekly nets. On the left, you can see everybody that's logged in. When a person has push-to-talk or Vox activated, the background of their call sign is green. When they stop talking or lift up on push-to-talk, it turns yellow. So you can see that Dave, KM6FQ, was the last one to talk. Down at the bottom, you can see aux channel 1 and aux channel 2, just because that's what I named them. If during a net or otherwise you want to talk privately with somebody, you can both click on the aux channel down at the bottom, and you will move over there and you can have a private conversation while everybody's chatting on the main channel. When you're done, you just double click on the main channel and you're moved back there. Very handy. On the right, there's 4 tabs. You can see chat, video, desktops, and files. Chats for, text messages, videos for video, desktops is for sharing a desktop, and there's a file storage area. We don't find that video is doesn't contribute a lot to a net. Usually audio and text are good enough, but once in a while we'll fire up everybody's cameras to stress the network and stress the server and make sure everything's okay. Pretty much all of these are 640 by 480 thumbnails, 10 or 15 frames per second. And that's about 100 kilobits per second per. With 7 of us there simultaneously, when I did this, I checked into the server, seeing how it was doing. And it was 10% CPU utilization and 10% network utilization. And it's a Raspberry Pi 3. So it's not very stressful on the server. And we could accommodate many, many more active users. When we push out a mesh network connection to a served agency, we'll make sure that the laptop they use in there or computer has a TeamTalk account and a TeamTalk client for them to use as they see fit. I'll talk a little bit about this one. In late 2016 and all through 2017, we started pushing a backbone out across our county, Ventura County. It's northwest of Los Angeles County. It's quite hilly. And we're pushing it from point to point to point. And at this particular point, which happens to be Sulphur Mountain, it's on private property, about a 46-acre spread. You can see the tower on the left. At this point, the backbone administrator put a Windows PC in some junker old fixed focus camera, and we watched from time to time. In September of 2017, another local ham who's a tech specialist sent me an article on how to stream webcams to TeamTalk. He said, give this a shot, see if you can figure it out. Maybe we'll use it eventually. Maybe we'll have to use it. So I did. I sent him a YouTube link of a live shot of my driveway test cam. Big deal. Anyway, I put the information away and didn't think about it. But in December of 2017, a fire broke out near Santa Paula, California, which is just over the peak of those hills you can see. He pinged me immediately and said, hey, don't you have a camera on Sulphur Mountain? Well, we did. Different brand, different model of camera I'd worked with, different OS, but I did manage to get it working, and this is what we saw. This was one of our typical Santa Ana winds, hot, dry, very windy and gusty. I streamed this out to YouTube for, I don't know, about an hour and 45 minutes before we lost electrical power at an intermediate network site. At that point in time, we had not installed any kind of backup power on any of the locations that we linked through. Anyway, after the power law came out, we lost the network. The fire you see there came down across the hill, and the light you see in the center is the owner's driveway light. It wiped that out. It came down towards the tower, and his property extends, I don't know, 75 or maybe 100 yards north of the tower. You're looking basically north. It came down to his property, turned to the west, proceeded west, and ravaged the town of Ventura. They lost hundreds of structures. It was bad. A few days later, I got an email from a fire inspector for the Ventura County Fire Department, asked me for the URL of the YouTube video, and it was still up there. So I gave it to him, and he thanked me. We didn't hear anything back from him directly, but we did hear indirectly that they found it useful because it was the first extant video of the fire. So anyway, lessons learned. We spent, I don't know, months hardening the network, backup power, more sites, better cameras, PTZ cameras, and proceeded through that. The next year in June, like they do every year, the County Board of Directors declared June Ham Radio Month. And in their proclamation, they specifically mentioned this video. So we got a lot of mileage out of it. So the next year, not even a year later, the Woolsey fire breaks out. This is Ventura County. This is actually my hometown. This camera is on the north edge of our valley, and you're looking southeast. Another hot, windy day, dry. fire broke out in Woolsey Canyon, which is, I don't know, 2 or 3 screens off to the left, right on the LA Ventura County line. And it proceeded left to right. And you can see it here threatening the southwest corner of Simi Valley. The fire proceeded down towards the southwest corner of the city. Ventura County Fire Department was there, fought them off. Then the wind turned and the fire went back up the hill, back down the other hill, proceeding south and southwest through the town of Thousand Oaks, lost another several hundred structures, continued south across the 101 freeway, up and over the Malibu hills and down into Malibu. And I think it stopped at the Pacific Ocean. So we streamed this one for 36 hours. And over that 36 hours, several hundred people checked in and out watching it. And we heard back later that a number of them found it useful because it was real-time information and more current they would get from traditional media. We haven't had any large brush fires here in Southern California since then. A number of small ones. This happened to break out in the pass, the freeway pass, right below the camera site, the radio site. And I happened to stream this for the half an hour or so it took them to put it out. If you look closely at the bottom center, you can see the strike team that a previous helicopter dropped. So anyway, around here in Southern California, video is an important service that we provide. Obviously, you can't see it if you're not on the mesh network. And streaming video of a field where nothing's happening except the dry brushes blowing isn't very useful. So what I do, I have several websites, both on the mesh network and on the internet, where I mirror screenshots of all the cameras updated every 5 minutes or so. And people do look at those frequently. If you've ever tried to relay a handwritten, single-spaced, full-page list of medicines across a voice channel, you know how slow and error-prone it can be. Even if you're doing via packet, copying a text file off of a thumb drive would be far better, less error-prone, and probably quicker. And there's 2 ways to do messaging. One is a plain old email server. It's a standard SMTP mail server configured for the mesh network. We recently got one going. We're in the process of giving people clients. The email server is on the mesh network, but is now configured to be able to send and receive email often on the internet. In other words, somebody, my daughter in Kentucky, could send mail to W6BI at k6pvr-mail.local.mesh at, I think, meshmail.org. I think that's it. Anyway, and it would come directly onto my PC in the ham shack, even if I didn't have internet running. I use Thunderbird. You could use Outlook, anything else. We have configuration instructions. And web clients are available, like Roundcube, and that's really easy to use. Here's a shot of my Thunderbird client. At the top is my internet email account, and down at the bottom is my other one, the mesh mail. And here's Roundcube. This is the web interface. So pretty easy to use, easy to set up. I mean, if you're on the mesh network and they set up an account on a email server for you, you're golden. I'll talk about WinLink. Most people know what it is. It's an email system originally set up for boaters. Excuse me. On HF originally, it was only the ALE radios, the really expensive commercial frequency agile radios. And over time, they've implemented it on AX25 packet, the Pactor servers. I mentioned VARA HF. RDOP is another older software modem for HF, and it's rapidly falling out of favor because VARA HF is so much better than it. By the way, a Pactor 4 modem will cost you close to $2,000. A VARA HF is software, and the license is, I think, $69. If you're interested in getting into WinLink and you want to run something faster than packet, VARA HF and its sister VARA FM are very inexpensive. And when it comes to passing HF traffic under less than ideal conditions, VARA HF is almost as good as Pactor 4 and way cheaper. On VHF, you got packet radio, APRS, VARA FM I mentioned, and AREDN networking, which has the advantage not only is it much faster, you don't have to specify your digipeating like you do over packet radio, APRS, and also VARA FM. And if you weren't aware of it, WinLink has a large set of messaging templates, ICS, USGS, FEMA, and a lot of state-specific ones, and they are actively updating those messaging templates at least a couple times a month. I stole this off the WinLink website and updated the bottom with my superior graphics editing skills, but you can see where VARA and VARA FM belong, and ham radio networking. This is WinLink Express. It's the email client for WinLink. Looks pretty straightforward, and creating a message is also straightforward, but specifying how you route it and who you route it to is a little challenging because it's different depending whether it's packet or VARA FM, or if you're going to telnet out to the WinLink servers. So it's a little more challenging to come up to speed on sending email. And honestly, I think for local traffic, if your mesh network is up, sending it to your local email server on the mesh network for local traffic is faster, and you don't have the attachment size limitation that you do on WinLink. Other things you can put on the internet. This is my weather station, which does not have its own web interface. This is an application called WeWX, or maybe it's WeWeather. It's open source software, runs on all the popular OSs and supports hundreds of different weather stations and environmental sensors. Put it at that. Because it's open source, people keep contributing to it. It's not all about MCOM. We've had a Scrabble server up and played a few games. BZ Flag is a tank game, which I'm terrible at, but it runs very well over the mesh network, and it's a lot of fun. And sometimes after the Wednesday night nets, we'll play a couple hands of poker. And this we added recently. AI6VX in Ventura, California, a couple years ago, built himself a seismometer. And I talked him to putting it on the mesh network a few weeks ago. So this is pretty cool. If the internet's down and you want to know what that last jiggle was, I guess you wouldn't have to worry about that too much in Tennessee, but it's near and dear to our hearts in Southern California. So we like to look at those. Talking about the hardware supported by AREDN, mostly designed for outdoor use with one notable exception, which I'll be talking about. Since it's outdoor use, it's weatherproof and uses power over Ethernet. If you're not familiar with that, I imagine pretty much everybody is now. There's 4 pairs in an Ethernet cable, 2 are used for data, and the 2 spare pairs are used for power and ground, tied together. Each pair is, one pair is used for ground, one pair is used for power. The transceivers in these radios, and there's it's a Linux computer with RAM and ROM and 2 software-defined modems that can change their speed, their modulation, etc., from millisecond to millisecond, depending on who they're talking to. And there's not 1, but not 2, because all of the hardware we recommend is what they call MIMO, multiple input, multiple output. That means the 2 radios transmit at the same time on the same channel, but different polarity. One's vertically polarized and one's horizontally polarized, and they combine it at the other end to double double the speed, or if you're comparing it to a single chain, sorry, you can get the same throughput with 3 dB less signal. Most of the models have built-in gain antennas, which is nice. And now, I think 6 or 8 months ago, they've started supporting the newer, faster, better 802.11ac versions of the older 802.11n devices, and they're significantly better. This is really old school, around 2010. I'm happy to say I never participated in this. Anyway, this is a Linksys WRT54G. It was the Linux version of Linksys's wireless access point. And in spite of having 2 antenna connectors on the back, it is not MIMO. Only has 4 gig of RAM, something like that. Won't even run the modern software. And remember, I mentioned 600 milliwatts was a typical power output these days. This thing was 60 milliwatts. So you're 10 dB down even before you have to go to lossy cables to external antennas. So a lot of people run the nano stations. They're getting pretty long in the tooth. There's an older XM version of both of them that's on the sunset list, and the XW version with more RAM is not yet on the sunset list, but they pretty much have the oldest, slowest CPUs of all the stuff that's out there. Here's what I'd recommend. Nice little microstick square antenna, and that's got all the electronics in it. 10 to 12 miles, but again, more RAM, more ROM, gigabit Ethernet ports. It's the 802.11ac, and that's about, let me see, 8 to 10 inches square, very light. This is a little better. This is a little pricey, but it works really, really well and has 2 Ethernet ports like the nano stations. I have one of these up on my tower. I like it a lot. These are the 802.11ac versions of the older 802.11n versions. They look identical. The only difference is the electronics. The PowerBeam AC 500. And by the way, we're now supporting the AC 620, and the 620 is the diameter of the dish in millimeters, so it's really big. The ones on the right, the Microtics, the guys who are backfitting their Go boxes with AREDN like these because they're very lightweight and very low wind resistance because they've got the mesh dish on the back. I recently deployed one of these and I really like it. It's a light beam. It's 802.11ac, 23 dBi gain, and that thing is only 75 bucks. I was amazed at how cheap it is. Excuse me. For those of us in a HOA restricted area, here's your solution. Microtik light dish feed at the feed point of an old satellite dish. You mount it there with a, I don't know, it's an $8 universal LNA mount you can get from Amazon. And the cool thing about this is HOAs are required to allow you to install a satellite TV, and they'll never notice that it's not pointing at a synchronous satellite. We have a number of people using these in Southern California. There's the one device that is not intended for outside use, obviously. This is a Microtik 5-port router, but it's got the AREDN code in it, which transforms it. This is the older version, and they recently came out with support for the newer versions. This one has a single CPU. The ports are 100 megs. It's okay on RAM, I think. These have multi-core CPUs, lots more RAM, gigabit ports, and people are now buying. I'd recommend these. It's not obvious, but the HAP AC3 on the right is about half again as wide as the AC2 on the left. This is how they work. And you put this in your shack, and port 1 down there goes to your home network. That lets everything on ports 2, 3, and 4, anything that's plugged into 2, 3, and 4 go out to the internet. If you also happen to have an RF link out to the ham radio network, it will know when you want to get to something out on the network and route the traffic up there. Highly recommend. This is one of the developers called this the AREDN Swiss Army knife, because it's just so useful. There's a number of other features that I'm not going to talk about now, but it's really useful. Here's a picture of an outdoor installation. It's got a nanostation at the top and a Ubiquiti LHG large head grid underneath it. And why would you have two? Well, one of our major sites in the San Fernando Valley is on Verdugo Peak. And the site is set back on a plateau from the edge. And there's a ham in the shadow of the hill on the eastern edge of San Fernando Valley. So his friend, who's a mile west, pulls the link down from Verdugo Peak and retransmits on another channel on the other node. I didn't mention it, but maybe I did. The nanostation has two ports, the square box on the top. So you run your network and PoE up to the nanostation, put it on the primary port, run a cable from the secondary port down to the second node. And that way you only have to run one cable up there for two nodes. And they're on different channels, so they don't interfere with each other. Just like you wouldn't put a Baofeng handy-talkie into production use at a network site or a repeater site, a number of these I've shown you, which are perfectly good for home use, you wouldn't put on a hilltop site. This is what the majority of hilltop sites use for access by the users down at ground level. That's a sector antenna, so named because it covers a certain sector of the compass rose. Most commonly, they're 120 degrees. They do make them from, I don't know, 45 degrees clear out to 180, but 120 is by far the most common. And in that box is a 120 degree vertically polarized antenna and a 120 degree horizontally polarized antenna. And you can see one of the two SMA connectors on the back with little jumpers down to the Ubiquiti rocket, which is a dual port node like all of the others. It just doesn't have internal antennas. It's built for use with an external antenna, either a sector or a dish when you're doing point to point. Excuse me. So this is a site in North Orange County, which is southeast of LA County, 75, 80 miles on a hilltop, about a quarter mile from the nearest dirt road. It's battery and solar powered, and he has a 2 gig, 3 gig, and 5 gig node looking over Orange County. It's got a pan-tilt zoom camera at the top and a little bullet camera at the back looking behind us where the batteries and solar panels are. He does not have a weather station up there, but he did hang a clock type thermometer on the chassis for the solar panels, and the camera, little bullet camera, looks at it so he knows how hot it is up there. That's been up there 6 or 7 years now. This is up on top of Verdugo Peak in the San Fernando Valley. It's been there since the 50s. In spite of all of the antennas, there's only a little bit of AREDN gear here. This site belongs to DARN, the Disaster Area Radio Network. They've been very gracious in letting us co-locate some of our gear with their stuff. Up at the tippy top, you can see 3 sector antennas, 2 gig pointing west, which is going to be decommissioned soon, 5 gig pointing west here, and a 5 gig pointing south for the user access. This dish antenna is a 3 gig, which is going to be decommissioned because we lost the rent on the site it was connected to. We've got an alternate link almost ready to commission. These two dish antennas here take the network farther east to, let me think, Mount Disappointment and Mount Wilson. Now, this picture was taken after a windstorm, is why the HF vertical is bent like that. Subsequent to taking this picture, they fixed it and raised it, and not too long after that, another windstorm snapped it in half. I don't know what they're going to do to replace it. So what's out there as far as networks? There are 2 or 3 software programs that are network mappers. They go out and crawl a network and discover all of the nodes they can get to, and they write information about them to a database. the nodes have a text file inside them that is all their vital data. So the network mapper pulls down hardware brand, hardware model, software version, how long it's been up, and just as importantly, who it can talk to and what's the quality of the link. And it pulls all of that data down into a database. And if that node happens to have the latitude and longitude installed, which is pretty much mandatory for the latest versions of software to function correctly, it can map it on a map. This happens to be Washington and Oregon. The orange ones are 5 gigs, the purple is 2 gigs, blue is 3 gigs, pink is 900. I see they still have a little bit of 900 out here. And the gray is no RF. That would be something like a HAP AC light inside somebody's shack. Here's the big daddy, Southern California. We kind of got a head start because a couple of the developers live in Southern California. Same color codes. When I looked at this and counted the nodes visible in this screenshot, I think it came up with 425. Because of tunnels, which are these dash lines, the node count is typically, lately it's been running between 500 and 600. So I got this map of your area in September of 2019, and Tom was kind enough to send me this morning some updated stuff, and I've invited him to talk about it. So Tom, are you capable of getting online and speaking?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
I can. Want me to go to the next one?
Yeah, go ahead. That's cool that you got the old map. That's really neat. And of course, now we got Ingrid, turn the volume down. We're multitasking over here. I think she might have fallen asleep. So I supplied. No, you're not going to get it there, Mark. Go there. Find the remote control.
Where's the remote control?
Stand by here, guys. I don't know if the feedback's very much to you or not, so. So this is the map of Tennessee. And of course, under all those nodes is a whole bunch more. And we got tunneled nodes and RF nodes and whatnot. And you can see down to Georgia. We have nodes down at Warner Robins, a big network down there that's tied into us. We got one up towards Evansville, Indiana, up around Newburgh, I believe. And then we got some connections out to Alaska. We helped them get started 6 or 7 years ago, and we stay connected to them. And of course, a trunk up to Mark into MH, so we can tie into the PBX network. Go ahead and take me to the next slide, and let's see what we get. Okay, that's honing in on Middle Tennessee. And you'll see over here to the right quadrant, that's Short Mountain. That's our tallest mountain in this area, around 2,200 feet, I believe.
And it's short.
And we've got, yeah, well, there is a little short mountain and a big short mountain. So, but it's not so short, but it is the tallest thing around us. And we've got a bunch of sectors, rockets, which we are going to be upgrading to some newer microtik equipment. But we have coverage looking back towards Murfreesboro and also up towards Cookeville and Monterey. And you see, we got a whole lot of RF connections. I think our longest one up there is like 49 miles to Monterey, to W4WTN, and it shoots straight back to Short Mountain, and he ties back into the rest of the network that way. Our other main sites, which are co-located with a good number of our M-Tiers repeater sites, just so happens, Gallatin and Short Mountain, Nashville, and the hub down toward Franklin, all have mesh connections. So we're at some point are going to use the mesh VoIP for our links. And what'll happen then is that key up delay will become much, much shorter than what we get now because of the way that the repeaters are linked. And that's a whole nother topic. We have a good VoIP network for phones and cameras. So we got some nice cameras in Gallatin and some other sites. What's fun about the one in Gallatin is right around July 4th. We got them trained on Nashville, and we've got some really cool recordings of the Nashville fireworks. And not only that, but it covers a whole lot of the cities in between. And it's quite the display all night long, not just Nashville, but all the other cities that are around that have fireworks displays. So that's quite the thing to view. All right, next slide, please, sir. Okay, talking about served agencies, this is a map of the TEMA, Tennessee Emergency Management Compound. And that comprises of the radio shop, which is up further up north on the north end of the compound, and then the state EOC, which is the large building that says Houston Barracks. And the dishes are on top of the building there. And they have a nice shot to Gallatin and back over to Lipscomb and to Love Circle Hill and Vanderbilt. And those are just dishes mounted on top of the building of TEMA. And we're tied into their network switches, which are run by the National Guard, complete with all of the power backup and whatnot. And we've had 0 failures. Back when we had the Nashville bombing, that was pretty much the only external internet that was coming into that facility for a while, because we were sourced from multiple sources way away from Nashville. Also, down toward the south end there is the TEMA Operations Center and the pit, which is the nerve center of where all the agencies and whatnot are. So we have our own mesh equipment there. We also supply our own Wi-Fi, totally independent of the Tennessee data network. And again, like I said, when the Nashville bombing happened and all of the other data services were down, we were still supplying data into that facility. Next slide, please.
I think that's it.
Okay, cool. That's my part.
Thanks, Tom. So anyway, where do you get all this information? ardenmesh.org. What they have there is a list of supported products, and please look it over if you want to buy something. Make sure it's supported. And that's where you get the software to download. Excuse me. Traditionally, or more historically, Arden has released a production release at worst case, every 2 years, and then 2 every 1 year or so. They've had some new blood for developers come in, and that production release schedule has speeded up. In addition, there are nightly builds, and it's called a nightly build. Excuse me, not because you get a new build every night. It's because the build process runs every night. It wakes up, sees if there's new patches to be submitted that have been approved, and if so, it builds a full set, and if not, it just goes back to sleep. A lot of us run nightly builds because they might add a new product that we want to run, add support for a new product, maybe some enhancements that we've been looking for, or it might even be a bug fix. And it's very rare for a nightly build to break something. It doesn't happen very often. So plus, by testing the nightly builds, we can give feedback to the developers. There's how-tos, FAQs, extensive documentation. The Arden documentation was catch as catch can until about 18 months ago, when Steve, AB7PA, took it upon himself to organize it. He put it all in a GitHub instance, and now the documentation is updated through a formal release process. And it's extensive. It's excellent. He's done a great job. If you're even the least bit interested, go to the docs file and start at the top. Just skim it. He's got all sorts of good information on, what's out there, how to do it, network topology recommendations, all sorts of good stuff. And they do have forums. There's over 4,400 members in the AREDN forums. They're organized on various topics, and there are regional forums, and there's a Tennessee forum. There's in California, there's, I don't know, half a dozen regional forums. It's unofficial, but there is a Facebook group for AREDN. It's got over 2,000 members. And AREDN recently created they've been on Slack for the developers, but a group of people created the Slack AREDN community, which is for general information, and it's fairly active. From me at orbsplace.net, I've put a beginner's guide PDF, which is kind of a summary of this, a PDF version of a presentation like this, with all the words supplementing all of the pretty pictures, and some other useful links, links to line of sight calculators, Fresnel zone calculator, useful stuff. Any questions? I'm done.
For Tom?
And if you have questions, ask Tom. He's your local source.
We usually do, yeah. Tom's a night owl though, that 3 a.m. call, you gotta set the alarm to talk to Tom some nights.
We got a question in the front.
Yeah, can Tom point us to where we can view those maps on the south mesh part of it?
Oh geez.
We can show on after we disconnect because we're on
That's
the.
fine.
We're
Yeah,
on
it's our boy down in Florida, KD4WLE, I believe it is his node, and it's just look for mesh map on KD4WLE. He's got the best server now.
Tom, is that map available on the internet also?
No,
Okay.
nope. Maybe at some point, but not right now.
Okay.
Maybe through my proxy.
Well, you've still got to be able to get to the internet with it. But
No,
yeah,
not through the internet.
right.
But on another network.
Yeah, but on other networks that might be connected through Mark, you can get there by proxy, but only if you're connected on the mesh on our system, then you can get to them.
Anybody else have any questions?
Thank you.
Nope. They're all shy. They'll hit us up tomorrow and next week as the gears start turning. So
That's good.
Cool. Hey, just to put a plug, we're gonna be at the HamQuest on Saturday. And I believe Mark N2MH has got a bunch of goodies to show off. He has made the trip from South Carolina all the way over here just to be here. He's got a table. I think M-Tiers will have a table. And so we'll be floating around, hanging around Mark's table or the M-Tiers table if you want to see stuff or ask questions.
maybe we'll be neighbors. We have a table also.
Okay, cool. If we can get there early enough and just get them all put to side by side, that's good. But yeah, cool.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you, Orb and Tom. Thank you. Very informative. We're looking forward to this for a while. And there you go.
Glad you enjoyed, guys.
Orb,
Yes, sir.
I do have one question. They said there was one winning ticket in California for Powerball. I just want to make sure it wasn't you.
Sadly, no.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought since you were here, we'd ask you, but
I
yeah,
I
you
threw some
probably
money-
wouldn't be here, right?
I threw some. Well, I might be. Yeah. I can't quit my job. I'm already retired.
All right. Well, I thank you, everybody. And
Sure
obviously, we recorded this, so if it's all right with you, we'll put it on our website also.
Yeah, no objections.
Okay.
And if you're interested in this stuff, if you search YouTube for AREDN and my call sign, there are a number of other similar topics out there.
Perfect. Well, thank you.
You bet. See you
All right,
guys.
see ya.
Bye.